The morning sun rose over Springfield, Missouri on June 7, 1992, illuminating a quiet residential street that was about to become the center of a profound American mystery. Inside a modest single-story home, the lights burned brightly, the television hummed with static, and a Yorkshire Terrier barked anxiously, yet the house was entirely devoid of human life. 3 women had simply vanished into the humid summer night, leaving behind their purses, their vehicles, and a baffling absence of physical evidence. How do 3 adults evaporate from a secure suburban home without a single witness, a struggle, or a trace? The residence belonged to 47-year-old Sherrill Levitt, a successful local cosmetologist known for her vibrant personality and deep devotion to her 19-year-old daughter, Suzie Streeter. Suzie, alongside her close friend, 18-year-old Stacy McCall, had just celebrated their high school graduation the previous evening. The 2 teenagers had attended several parties across town before deciding to sleep at Sherrill's house, a seemingly safe and responsible choice that would ultimately seal their unknown fate. They arrived at the home sometime after 2 in the morning, crossing the threshold into a void from which they would never return. The initial discovery of their absence was marked by confusion rather than immediate panic. When friends arrived at the property the following morning, intending to finalize plans for a water park trip, they found the front door unlocked and swung open slightly. The interior presented a chilling tableau of interrupted domesticity, as if the occupants had stepped out for merely a moment. Cheryl's bed appeared slept in, while the teenagers' clothing from the night before was neatly folded, signaling they had prepared for rest before the inexplicable intervention occurred. The physical state of the residence offered a paradoxical narrative that continues to frustrate investigators decades later. All 3 women's purses were lined up meticulously on the floor of Suzie's bedroom, containing their cash, identification, and keys. Outside, their 3 vehicles remained parked in the driveway and along the street, undisturbed and locked. The only tangible sign of irregularity was a shattered glass globe on the front porch light, its fragments swept neatly into a pile, suggesting someone had attempted to clean the debris before the situation escalated. When the Springfield Police Department was finally summoned to the scene later that evening, the responding officers initially treated the situation as a routine missing persons inquiry, perhaps a spontaneous trip or a profound misunderstanding. However, as hours bled into days, the gravity of the circumstances necessitated a drastic shift in their approach. Detectives began searching for a discernible modus operandi, a distinct pattern or method of operation that could link this bizarre vanishing to known criminal elements in the region. But the absolute lack of forced entry or signs of a violent struggle left them with an empty canvas. The integrity of the crime scene had been severely compromised before law enforcement even crossed the threshold. Throughout the day, well-meaning friends and family members had inadvertently contaminated the environment, walking through the house, using the restrooms, and tidying up the seemingly messy areas. This well-intentioned intrusion effectively obliterated any microscopic trace evidence that might have been left behind by an intruder, severely hampering the forensic analysis from the very beginning. In a devastating blow to the early investigation, a potentially critical piece of digital evidence was permanently lost during those chaotic first hours. A friend who had entered the home noticed the answering machine blinking with a new message and instinctively pressed play. According to later police reports, the message was described as strange and sexual in nature, but the listener, feeling uncomfortable, immediately deleted the recording. That erased audio remains one of the most agonizing lost clues in the history of the Springfield Three investigation, a phantom recording that can never be recovered. The emotional toll on the families was immediate and catastrophic. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, realized with terrifying clarity that her daughter would never willingly leave without her purse, her migraine medication, or her beloved floral shorts, which were found folded in the bedroom. The sudden gaping hole in these families' lives transformed ordinary citizens into relentless advocates, thrusting them into a blinding media spotlight as they pleaded for any information regarding their missing loved ones. As the desperate search expanded, investigators began sifting through a massive influx of public tips, looking for any anomaly in the neighborhood's typical rhythm. Several witnesses reported seeing a dark-colored older model van loitering near the Levitt residence in the early morning hours of June 7th. While this sighting provided a tangible thread to pull, tracking down a generic vehicle based on fleeting nocturnal observations proved to be a monumental and ultimately fruitless task for the detectives assigned to the case. The sheer scale of the subsequent search effort was unprecedented for the region, transforming the landscape of the Ozarks into a grid of intense scrutiny. Thousands of volunteers scoured wooded areas, abandoned properties, and local waterways, while authorities distributed hundreds of thousands of missing person flyers across the country. A staggering $100,000 reward, which eventually grew to over $1 million, was offered for information leading to the women's safe return. Yet this immense financial incentive failed to break the silence of whoever held the answers. Amidst the deluge of information, a peculiar and unsettling tip emerged from a local woman who claimed to have seen Sherrill Levitt's vehicle in a grocery store parking lot on the morning after the disappearance. According to this witness account detailed in investigative files, a woman resembling Suzie Streeter was driving, looking incredibly distressed, while an unidentified male sat in the passenger seat. The witness reported hearing a male voice sharply command the driver to back out. But despite the specificity of this encounter, the lead could never be conclusively verified or tied to a concrete suspect. The shadow of suspicion eventually fell upon a convicted kidnapper and local resident named Robert Craig Cox, who was living in Springfield at the time of the vanishing. Cox possessed a violent criminal history and crucially had been working underground utility jobs in the direct vicinity of Sherrill Levitt's home. His proximity, combined with a background that demonstrated the capacity for complex and forceful abductions, elevated him to a primary person of interest in the eyes of federal and local investigators. Constructing a definitive case against Cox, however, proved maddeningly difficult due to the shifting nature of his alibi, a legal term referring to a claim or piece of evidence that one was elsewhere when an act is alleged to have taken place. Cox initially claimed he was at church with his girlfriend on the morning of June 7th, a statement she originally corroborated before later recanting and admitting she had lied to protect him. Despite this glaring inconsistency and his subsequent taunting of investigators from a Texas prison, authorities lacked the physical evidence required to issue an indictment. The inability to secure an arrest deepened the psychological wound inflicted upon the Springfield community. The prevailing sense of security that had defined the city was shattered, replaced by a lingering paranoia that a predator capable of making 3 women disappear without a trace was still walking among them. Residents began installing security systems, locking doors with newfound vigilance, and viewing their quiet streets through a lens of profound suspicion, fundamentally altering the cultural fabric of the town. The enduring mystery of that quiet street continued to generate a myriad of theories, ranging from the plausible to the highly conspiratorial. Some seasoned detectives hypothesized that the women were targeted by a transient serial killer passing through the Interstate 44 corridor, a predator who struck with terrifying efficiency and moved on before the sun rose. Others suggested a localized, targeted abduction, theorizing that Sherrill, Suzie, or Stacy had unknowingly crossed paths with someone who harbored a deeply personal and violent grievance. One of the most persistent and macabre rumors surrounding the Springfield Three involves a local hospital parking garage that was under construction during the summer of 1992. Whispers began circulating through the community that the women's remains had been concealed within the concrete foundation of the structure before it was poured, a theory fueled by the sheer logistical difficulty of disposing of 3 bodies without detection. This localized legend grew so pervasive that it eventually forced law enforcement to address the speculation directly. In an attempt to lay the parking garage theory to rest, an independent mechanical engineer utilized ground-penetrating radar to scan the concrete surface of the structure in 2007. The radar detected 3 distinct anomalies beneath the surface, roughly the size and shape of human bodies, sparking a renewed frenzy of media attention and public demand for excavation. However, the Springfield Police Department, consulting with forensic experts, concluded that the anomalies were likely core samples or structural irregularities inherent to the building process, not clandestine graves. The decision not to drill into the parking garage foundation remains a point of intense contention between amateur sleuths and official investigative bodies. Law enforcement maintains that the radar findings do not meet the legal threshold of probable cause required to partially demolish a functioning medical facility, citing the immense cost and the high probability of finding nothing. Yet for those desperate for closure, the undisturbed concrete represents a literal and figurative roadblock, a potential tomb sealed by bureaucratic caution. The unresolved nature of the Springfield Three case has had lasting implications for how missing persons investigations are handled on a national level. The initial delays and the catastrophic contamination of the crime scene served as a grim educational tool for law enforcement agencies, highlighting the critical need for immediate scene preservation even when foul play is not immediately apparent. Protocols for securing locations, handling digital evidence like answering machines, and coordinating rapid multi-agency responses were significantly overhauled in the wake of these failures. As the years stretched into decades, the challenge for journalists and historians has been to preserve the humanity of Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy, ensuring they are remembered as vibrant individuals rather than mere elements of a cold case file. Sherrill was a dedicated mother who had recently remodeled her home to create a sanctuary for herself and her daughter. Suzie was a dynamic young woman with a passion for cosmetology, eager to follow in her mother's professional footsteps, while Stacy was known for her bright smile and her anticipation of starting college in the fall. The transition from an active, urgent hunt to a stagnant cold case is a grueling reality for any police department. The massive war room dedicated to the Springfield Three was eventually dismantled, the thousands of tip sheets filed away in archival boxes, and the primary detectives slowly retired or moved on to fresh horrors. While the case remains technically open, the momentum that once fueled the daily briefings has been replaced by a quiet, persistent hope that a deathbed confession or a sudden advancement in forensic technology might one day shatter the silence. For the families left behind, the passage of time offers no sanctuary from the ambiguous loss they endure daily. Janice McCall transformed her agonizing grief into a lifetime of advocacy, founding organizations to support families of missing persons and relentlessly keeping her daughter's name in the public consciousness. The psychological purgatory of not knowing whether to mourn a death or hold out hope for a miraculous return is a specific type of torture that only those tethered to unsolved disappearances can truly comprehend. The fundamental mechanics of the crime continue to defy logical explanation, presenting a puzzle with missing pieces. How does an assailant or multiple assailants control 3 adult women simultaneously without a single neighbor hearing a scream, a breaking window, or the sound of a struggle? The absolute absence of blood, hair, or fiber evidence suggesting violence within the home implies a level of coercion or immediate, overwhelming threat that remains entirely unidentified. The legacy of the 1992 vanishing casts a long, indelible shadow over the Ozarks, a permanent scar on the historical record of Missouri. It stands as a chilling reminder of the fragility of suburban safety, proving that the most profound darkness can penetrate the most ordinary of settings. The missing women have become a permanent fixture in the region's collective memory, a cautionary tale whispered to new generations about the unpredictable nature of human malevolence. Today, the house on East Delmar Street still stands, its architecture unchanged, yet it remains eternally defined by the ghosts of that June morning. The porch light has long been repaired and new families have occupied the space, but the echo of the empty house persists in the annals of American crime. Until the earth yields its secrets or a conscience finally breaks under the weight of guilt, the fate of Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall will remain locked in the silent, suffocating grip of the unknown.